The Male Couple, How Relationships Develop, David P. McWhirter, MD, Andrew M. Mattison, MSW, PhD. Chapter 5, Stage 3, Maintaining, 4th and 5th years. Characteristics: 1. Reappearance of the individual. 2. Taking risks. 3. Dealing with conflict. 4. Establishing traditions. What strikes us about their home was that you could see Tim's touch and Phil's touch working in harmony. It looks like a carefully put together home, and their pride shows as Phil gestures to the living room and says, "This is us." When we sit down to talk, the two elements of harmony are present again. They watch each other so as not to interrupt. Tim and Phil are 35 and 34 and have been a couple for nearly 5 years. Tim is a lawyer and Phil is an architect. Each has 2 children from previous marriages, and both take pride in their mutually owned home. All 4 children visit on the same alternate weekends and spend time together as a family. Tim's boys are 9 and 11. Phil's daughter and son are 8 and 10. The kids try hard to get along together, Phil says. My 2 are happier than they've ever been, Tim smiles. I've been teaching my older son and Phil's daughter tennis, Tim says. I haven't forgotten how good it feels to get on the courts every week. I think it's good for them. Yeah, somehow I never made it as a tennis star, Phil chuckles. When Tim and I tried playing together, it was pretty clear I was better at chess. So I've been playing chess with the other 2 while jocks head off to the park. It's the Eggheads versus the Terrible Tigers, and we're going to have a home series one of these days with the losers cooking the spaghetti. In individual interviews, Phil confesses that he feels uneasy. You know, when Tim is off doing tennis with the kids, it's different from when all 6 of us used to do something together, like going to the planetarium. I guess it's sort of that way when the kids aren't here too. Sometimes I'm reading, and Tim is downstairs talking to old friends on the phone. But I've enjoyed rediscovering a couple of my old friends too, so I guess it's fair. But nonetheless, I'm alone reading while he's on the phone. We used to be together more. And Tim says, "It's crazy, but sometimes I feel like I'm losing Phil. It makes no sense. Just because he's reading again doesn't mean he'll leave me. I wondered if that's related somehow to the way I find myself telling Phil that I don't always like the way we are together in bed. It scares me to hear myself say it, but I keep saying it. He's terrific about being willing to experiment with sex. Maybe I'm afraid he'll start experimenting with more people. This is all crazy," he laughs. "We're really happy." Tim also tells us, "In the kitchen yesterday, I found myself saying, 'For God's sake, Phil, can't you ever remember to keep the hair out of the drain in the tub?' I guess it's bugged me for a while, but it didn't seem important. But it does bother me. Why I chose that moment when we were cooking dinner as opposed to 1,000 times in the past few years, I'll be damned if I know. Maybe it had something to do with the way he had looked at the guy in the supermarket. It's confusing. It led to a bizarre fight, nothing physical, that lasted 3 days, and then I sulked for 1 day." Tim's brother and his wife are close to both men and are regularly and all regularly visit one another's homes. Tim's brother and his wife are close to both men, and all regularly visit one another's homes. Tim had a long talk with his sister-in-law, asking her advice about the trouble they were having. She made some helpful suggestions that got them talking again. Sometimes I think we're learning from the kids, Phil tells us. When they have a fight, none of them rushes for a suitcase. They have to find some way to work it out. My daughter said something to Tim yesterday at breakfast. She said, "I can tell you guys love each other because Daddy always fixes your oatmeal, and you always bring flowers for Daddy on Friday after work." I think she hit it, Tim says. When I'm most scared, I think about how many little ways we found each other, and I know in my heart we've got a home. This is a stage during which maintaining the relationship relies on establishing a balance between confusion and understanding, individuality and togetherness, conflict and its resolution, and autonomy and independence. Each partner usually has found such deep satisfaction in the early years of the relationship that the startling discovery of faults in the other precipitates withdrawal or arguing and bickering over minor issues. The shocking realization is that the same person who was once the object of high passion and the paragon of all perfection has now become the partner who leaves his dirty underwear on the bedroom floor and dishes in the kitchen sink. Reappearance of the individual. The totality of the blending in stage 1 and the nesting in stage 2 places the relationship at center stage. The early merger of two individuals into one entity maintains the momentum for the first 3 years. As satisfying as the blending of stage 1 was, and as fulfilling as the nesting of stage 2 was, both contribute to the oneness of the pair. Now, the reappearance of each partner as an individual becomes central to maintaining the relationship through stage 3. During stage 1 and well into stage 2, couples function as if they were just one. Just as individual self-sufficiency gives way to a dependency to create the relationship, so the reappearance of each partner's self-identity is the next milestone in the process of relationship growth. After 3 years together, the couple's mutual confidence in the relationship supports the emergence of former individual traits, habits, and characteristics. As a consequence of the relationship's history and maturation, it not only can tolerate these new additions, but it also needs each partner's individuality to avoid stagnation and to assure growth. Couples begin to sense that too much togetherness is stagnating. Each partner moves to rediscover old interests as well as to develop new ones that are his alone. This process establishes new individual autonomy. Figuratively speaking, for most couples, until now there has been only one entity, the relationship. With the new individual autonomy, there are now 3 entities, each partner and the relationship. In the above vignette, Phil and Tim demonstrate the reappearance of the individual. As benign as the example of playing together, as benign as the example of playing different games may seem, it is really the tip of the iceberg. They used to do everything together, even when they might have preferred to do something separately. Sometimes, without knowing it, they would submerge their individual desires to do what's best for us. Phil used to play tennis and Tim used to play chess. They both stopped and went to the planetarium instead. At the time, neither missed the surrendered activity because the sacrifice was made generously in the service of the relationship. Needs that are not being fulfilled within the relationship find other safe avenues of satisfaction. They find others to participate in activities in which the partners do not share, such as sports, theater going, or politics. They also develop new interests during this time. Interestingly enough, their different new interests are often complementary. One partner becomes interested in real estate, and the other develops skills in remodeling houses. One partner takes courses in cooking, and the other becomes interested in auto mechanics. For a while, Wayne had me working like crazy in the garden. We'd spend hours out there, and most of the time I liked doing it because it was a project we were doing together. But gradually it dawned on me that before Wayne came along, I hated gardening. I liked the results, like the flowers and all those fresh vegetables, but we know that we no longer have to buy. I've learned dozens of ways to cook vegetables. Now I stay out of the garden, but tell him what vegetables to plant. He really didn't need me out there with him. For some couples, the reappearance of individuality occurs smoothly and with a minimum of difficulty. The transition is so easy for some couples that they do not even recognize that it has happened. It is only in retrospect or with questioning that they see it for themselves. For others, there is a sense of confusion and a fear of too much separation and possible loss of the relationship. Chris and Steve are talking with us about how they slipped into individualizing without even knowing what was happening. I'm not really sure when I got the idea that Steven couldn't satisfy all of my needs. I guess at the start I really expected he would, but both of us knew that wasn't so, but still felt like it should be. When he started going out with some old friends without me, I sure got some evenings alone that I really had wanted. Chris chimes in. I had some second thoughts about going out without him, but I wanted to do it so badly that it was easy. Steve was continuing to satisfy so many of my needs that I figured I was really lucky. He couldn't be everything for me. Another couple illustrates the same point. I went through hell when David told me he was joining a gym without me. He hadn't ever done anything like that before. I was irrational about it. It didn't make any difference that I wasn't interested in the gym. It was just the idea that he would do it without me. Peter smiles as he reflects on the past. He was doing a lot of other independent things too. He started buying his shirts without asking my opinion. He even started going to the movies with friends. I was terrified that I was going to lose him. Still another example, Peter had such a tight hold on me before that, when I did get a little freedom, I just went wild, David tells us. I tried to tell Peter that doing some things with old friends and going to the gym wouldn't change how I felt about him, but he wouldn't believe me. For couples like David and Peter, one of the major consequences of this process of individualizing is conflict. They begin to fight over little things that gradually escalate into major battles, threatening the foundation of the relationship. Couples feel the togetherness of their mateships threatened as each partner begins to branch out. Actually, finding outside sexual partners is part of the next characteristic, taking risks. However, the return of sexual interest outside the relationship generates fears of loss and abandonment. Although Steve did not have an early expectation of sexual exclusivity, after the first few months, he and Chris slipped into a monogamous relationship, which excluded outside sexual contact. Steve tells us, "Yeah, the tables really turned on me when Chris started talking about going to the baths again. I couldn't believe him at first. I figured he was tired of me and that I was going to get dumped." He is talking retrospectively about stage 3. "When I started thinking about sex with other guys again, I couldn't help but figure Jim was having sex with his old friends. For me, I knew I could do it and I'd come home for sure, but when I thought about him doing it, I went crazy. Sort of like a double standard, I guess." And with the results of other characteristics, there are some positive effects of individualizing. It does set the scene for the development of other characteristics, especially taking risk and conflict resolution, both of which become important elements in the continuing growth of the partnership. Some couples report that the return of individual interests and activities enriched, stabilized, and invigorated the relationship, adding strength and security. Tim tells us that when he began to have sexual contacts outside the relationship, early in stage 3, he knew he would not leave Phil. But when Phil had the first outside sexual relationship, Tim was terrified. "We went through the whole trip of trying to reassure each other, you're my number one man and all that, but the words didn't help all that much. It was repeatedly finding him coming home to me, no matter how terrific the other guy seemed, that finally calmed the fear." Phil says, "I'm not going away. I may go play, but I'm not going away. And I don't think Tim is either. When we first started living together, I couldn't stand Steve's friends." Chris is telling us how things changed in their 3rd or 4th year together. "I think I was really jealous, so I made all of them bad guys. He stopped seeing them, as I recall, then he started seeing them again despite my previous objections. I relented and told him to bring them home. Well, I really started to like them. They've become part of the family now, and we get a lot out of being together. I was almost always a loner before we got together. Then for 3 years, I never had any time to myself. I'd get irritable and wouldn't know what was wrong. I finally started taking some time alone again, long drives, walks in the park, even a few days backpacking in the mountains. At first, George had a fit, but when he saw how happy I'd be when I got home, he was eager for me to get the time alone. In fact, he likes his time now too." In this stage, men learn that they can move away from the relationship and gain confidence that each will be present and available to the other upon return. Variations. The individual's reappearance is most sensitive to and affected by differences between men, such as their ages, backgrounds, or previous relationship experiences. Some relationships never experience loss of the individual in stage 1. Instead, the partners accommodate each other and find complementarity earlier. Their experience of individualizing is merely a change in direction for their relationships. It is formidable enough when both partners begin to re-emerge as individuals around the same time. However, more frequently, one partner begins before the other. This confounds an already complex source of tension in the relationship. Most couples are not aware of what is happening and, therefore, cannot understand that it is a normal part of the growth of their relationship. During these difficult times, frequently mentioned thoughts and feelings emerge. One may think, "What's wrong with me? Don't I love him anymore?" Another may find himself wondering, what's wrong with him? He seems not to want me anymore. He's changing. He's not the same guy. Yet another person may confront a painful thought, such as, what's wrong with us? Is this a mismatch? This kind of discrepancy in individualizing is one of the most common problems we see in our clinical practice. The discrepancy also manifests itself earlier when one partner begins with individual reappearance in a previous stage. Though some couples desperately try to avoid the reappearance of the individual and, by vigilant avoidance, postpone it for a time, most are carried on the tide of its natural development. Couples continually remind us that this issue never goes away completely. The longer they are together, the deeper and richer is the bond of the relationship, and the more necessary it is to develop as individuals at the same time. Dick and Michael have been together for 5 years. We still do everything together. We get teased a lot, called the Bobbsey twins. One guy told us that the prom was over, but we're still dancing the same waltz. Guys who start doing things apart are headed for a breakup for sure. Our relationship is number one for us, and we're not going to let anything get in the way. Couples can use many different reasons for postponing individualizing, such as fear of loss, belief that it is wrong to have needs that the other cannot fulfill, or the reluctance of one partner to individualize. Problems. Of course, the major problem is the fear of losing the other. It can become a major obstacle. Couples often report that during this period, the accompanying fear of abandonment is so painful that dissolution of the relationship seems the only way to solve the problem. Other researchers, Sauer and Robbins, Bell and Weinberg, have discovered that male relationships commonly end at around the last part of the 3rd year together. We believe that these terminations often are attributable to the appearance of the individual. Couples can get so involved in their individual interests that they drift apart and distance themselves from the relationship. As mentioned above, the time discrepancy in the reappearance of the individual can wreak havoc with a couple. More often, couples do not understand the process and interpret the need for individualizing as something far more sinister than it is. One individual may be more inclined to dependency than the other, causing him to cling to the partner when the partner wants to do things on his own. Taking risks. Although couples start taking risks from the moment of meeting, the reappearance of the individuals now forces and permits each partner to take risks of increased magnitude. In stage 3, risks are taken with the lover. The partner dares to bring up something about the other that he finds to be less than wonderful. With the lover, risk may include not only new sexual friendships, but also more time apart, disclosures of dissatisfactions ranging from their own lovemaking to expressing negative feelings for mutual friends or the other's family. Risk is taken with the relationship. The silent question is there. If I do this, am I going to damage our relationship? The third risk seen at this time is with the self. The fear emerges that I am not all that he thinks I am. The person confesses flaws, first to himself and then to his lover. Taking risks with the self may include intense looking inward, and dissatisfaction. These three areas of risk permit the individual to move along his own path of growth. This movement counteracts stagnation and helps in the maintaining that is the hallmark of this stage. Each partner becomes more aware that he wants the relationship even if he does not know why. A result of risking is new knowledge of the self, of the other, and of the relationship, and risking the disclosure increases personal vulnerability. Taking risk occurs not only with the lover and the relationship, but also with others, including friends, fellow employees, and family. These risks include coming out to people at work, taking assertive career actions, or trying new activities like learning to fly or water ski. Earlier in the relationship, there are various reasons why male couples were not visible to some friends, family members, neighbors, or colleagues. Some of these reasons include the couple's own insecurities about the relationship and their fears of coming out to each other. The usual fears range from estrangement from the family to loss of a job. By the time of stage 3, families have gotten accustomed to seeing the men together, and many couples, if they have not already done so, take the risk of coming out to their families. Paul cringes when he remembers finally coming out to his family. The worst was the family. First, no one ever mentioned him. That made more distance from the family I loved. Then they called him my roommate. Then the first holiday came, and I went back home alone and missed him so much. That damned denial and pretending. We slid right into it, in collusion with them, the unspoken agreement. All that chatter with Mom and not looking at each other. He was the most important person in my life. And all of us, including me, denied his existence by what was carefully not said. I guess I was afraid of being rejected by them. We'd never talk openly even about my being gay. Lo and behold, after 3 years I couldn't stand the charade any longer. We talked to my folks together. Of course, they already knew, but were just as afraid to ask about it as we were to tell about it. Some men move closer emotionally to their families. Parents may offer advice, and letters are now addressed to both. There is a reconciliation of some sort except for those families who choose prejudice over blood ties, or the male couple that insists on isolation because of feelings of shame. Older couples in our study were awed and sometimes made uncomfortable by young male couples of today who are able to establish these ties with families. For male couples who reconnect with biological families at about this time, they report relief and appreciation. It came at a good time, Paul says. We needed that boost just about then. Risking becomes a tough fact of life, with the threat of loss never out of sight. If I'd tell him what I really thought about how his family is treating us, I'm afraid he'd walk out on me. At the last provocation, his mom won't invite us to a family gathering. The whole family is short-tempered and hypersensitive. If I bring it up to him, his temper flares just like the rest of them. When I started looking at other guys and going to the baths for outside sex, I was keeping everyone I met at a distance, afraid that I'd fall in love again and lose what I had with George. The last thing I wanted was to harm our relationship. Yet I couldn't resist my urges for new sexual adventures. Parents take more risks with 3 4 and 5-year-olds than with younger children. So too, male couples take more risk as their relationships move beyond 3 years. They now trusted sufficiently to dare to tell the partner more. It was easier to tell what one liked earlier. Now the time has come to tell more of what is disliked about self, partner, and relationship. It is distasteful medicine that helps to maintain the health of this increasingly sturdy relationship. Somewhere along the line, we started having talks that were like encounter groups. We started telling each other what we didn't like. Our gripes and annoyances started coming out. It wasn't easy to risk hurting each other. We were so used to saying only the good things that seemed risky enough, let alone adding the bad stuff now. The first time he told me I had bad breath, I thought I'd die. But then, if your own lover doesn't tell you, who else would? There are immediate benefits for taking risks as well as the long-term benefits. A partner may respond to being told about an annoying habit in a variety of ways. Once told, he may see it and respond positively. The relief at the moment is a small celebration. The couple has done something difficult together and has taken a step forward. After 3 years, Joe summoned his courage and one morning said, "Paul, those double-knit slacks are snagged and out of style. They look awful." "Oh, I never noticed. What would be better?" Joe tells us he had thought Paul's lack of concern about clothes was cute in the beginning, but increasingly felt he did not want his lover to be seen by other people that way. After I told him and he was okay with it, I realized that helping him dress better was something I could do for him. He was doing a lot for me already. From these small risks, large ones become more possible. It was one little thing like that after another, Joe tells us. Before I knew how I had gotten there, I found myself telling Paul I wanted to try having sex with a friend who had been at our house for dinner. That was harder than criticizing his slacks, but the time had come. Taking risks begins differently for different couples. Some leap right into it, like diving into an icy lake. Others try the waters, one toe at a time. You can't imagine how I felt when I came into the apartment and found Bob making out with this cute guy right in the living room. I knew we shouldn't have hired a male maid. They both tried to get me into a three-way, but I was so taken aback, I just stomped into the bedroom and slammed the door. Bob's explanation was innocent enough, and God knows how often I had wanted to trick with him myself. Still, I put up a righteous front. After all, we both were committed to monogamy then. I had such mixed feelings. Like, how could he do this to me? What would the guy think about this? Did this mean Bob and I were finished? Yet I wanted to do the same thing, only Bob beat me to the punch, Les explains. Bob jumps in. "Hey, I'm the guy who took the risk. You were just jealous. We were both interested in outside sex, but hadn't leveled with each other. We had talked about how cute the maid was and what it would have been like to fool around with him. I really didn't plan it, it just happened. I did feel guilty and defensive, especially when Les caught me and got so mad. But it did get us to start talking about risking outside sex. We both wanted it, but felt that something just wasn't right about it. It was a good thing, as it turned out, but it was hell at the same time." For all couples in our study, some outside sexual activity had begun by the end of this stage. Often it had begun in stage 2. There is a difference in the level of sexual risk-taking in stage 3, however. Sexual activity with others was limited previously to sex for the sake of sex. There were the baths for casual, one-time contacts. Now, one or the other partner may form a friendship including sex that can threaten the unincluded partner. I used to be that going to the baths or meeting a new trick at the gym was I used to It used to be that going to the baths or meeting a new trick at the gym was okay. Andy started working out with Tim twice a week, then brought him home one afternoon to meet me. I suspected he was interested in having an affaire when I got the vibes that Tim was more than just a new friend. At first, I kept quiet, then finally asked him about his relationship with Tim. I was afraid Tim was my replacement, but I decided if Andy was replacing me, he was crazy. Anyway, the situation got us to talking about more than casual, outside sex, but about having sex with guys who became ongoing friends. The realization has come in stage 3 that the world has told another untruth. There is no Santa Claus, and one limited human, no matter how wonderful or willing, cannot meet all the needs of his lover. Nor is this bittersweet dawning of shared awareness limited to sex. Life is broad. The relationship is now sufficiently strong to help each person avoid this culturally insinuated pitfall of expecting all needs to be met by the other. In this stage, risk permits one to look to others to meet some of those needs. Sometimes couples talk a lot, and sometimes it is simply done. The behavior tells the story. It is scary, but one does go to others and return home. I hadn't played basketball in almost 3 years when my friend John invited me to join their new team, Peter recalls. I used to play a lot, but I stopped when I moved in with Frank. He hates the game, thinks it's silliness for 10 men to run back and forth chasing and bouncing a fat ball. Anyway, I was really missing the game and the fun I'd had with the other guys. So I joined John's team, even though Frank wasn't so happy about it. He figured I'd drift away from him, but I knew I was going to be okay for but I knew it was going to be okay for me. Another said it was wrong. I knew it was dead wrong, but there it was. I couldn't give Don the kind of companionship he got from men his own age. I was older, but always thought we would be everything the other needed or wanted. Now here we were 4 years later. He's out with the boys because I don't want to go. I'm fine that he's out there, and I miss him when he's away. Still, having fun with his peers makes him happier at home. The male double standard plagues the couple at first. Joe says, I knew what I was doing was safe, and I finally saw he was doing the same thing. It's a thing about being men. We both had to see what was good for the gander is good for the other gander, too. There it is. We learned there was no goose. Just we two ganders. I feel it's really okay for me to have outside recreational sex, Carl tells us. I know that I can handle it and not get so involved that our relationship is in jeopardy. I guess I don't trust him to do the same thing. In the above vignette about playing basketball, Frank had some mixed feelings about Peter's activities away from him. Peter had his own mixed feelings. I knew that playing basketball was just for exercise and some time with the guys. But when Frank started playing bridge every week and spent so much time with his new duplicate partner, I felt really uneasy about it. I think I was jealous and didn't want him to do it. The double standard is a well-established cultural attitude that finds its most glaring example between husbands and wives. Gay men sharing the same male attitude come to grips with the accompanying problems with greater ease. Insecure and fearful of damaging the relationship, some couples have difficulties in taking risks. They express their dislikes in covert and indirect ways. Sometimes their negative feelings toward their partners are expressed through joking or campy sarcasm. I guess I was afraid of rocking the boat. We got along so well in the first few years without many disagreements or real differences. Taking a chance on losing what we have by criticizing him seemed too much to me. My parents divorced early because of all the disagreements they had. I didn't want to follow in their footsteps. My annoyances began to get expressed by making jokes and pretending like it didn't matter when it did. Joe, ordinarily a deep baritone, stands up with his hand on his hips and says, "Listen, honey," in a high, winny voice, "if you don't do something about these scattered dresses of yours, I'll divorce you." He is referring to not liking his lover's clothes dropped on the bedroom floor. They both laugh, but the point gets across. Taking risks appears to be an inevitable occurrence in the process of relationship growth. Most couples start with careful risk and proceed into their period of increased risk. Individualizing is partially responsible, and often the process includes considerable conflict. Dealing with conflict. Although for most of their lives, gay men have avoided conflict at almost any price, now is the time in their relationships when they must come to terms with it. Conflict is not necessarily new, and in earlier stages, the couples have been handling their disagreements and differences in many of the ways we have outlined. However, in stage 3, couples generally devise definitive means of neutralizing, resolving, or completely avoiding conflict for the present and into the future. Dealing with conflict is a developmental task that can be avoided with no Dealing with conflict is a developmental task that can be avoided no longer if the relationship is to continue to grow. Finding effective ways to manage conflict usually results in the couple establishing a system. The system may not resolve discords, but the discords are better managed. When such a system is not developed, maintaining the relationship becomes a much more unstable process. Again, after their first years together, couples find the mundane invading their romance. Formerly tolerated annoyances become more irritating. Leaving the cap off the toothpaste or hair in the shower now comes up for discussion. During stage 1, the threat of conflict is experienced as potentially lethal to the relationship. Couples move quickly to restore harmony. During stage 3, the expression of anger, disagreement, and disappointment is not as frightening. With the reappearance of the individual, there are differences. Conflict is natural and expected as the couple remembers that they are two separate individuals as a couple. Now they begin to tolerate the discord and also to develop styles of managing conflict in an attempt to restore peace. Anger does erupt more easily, whereas in the past it had been too threatening. Now the expression of negative feelings becomes an important ingredient in individual growth and relationship maintenance. Ways of dealing with conflict are different for each couple and usually evolve slowly over time. Couples use trial and error methods to discover the most effective ways for themselves. Sources of conflict are multiple. Conflict may arise from within the relationship. It is just as likely, however, that the root of the conflict comes from within the individual or from outside the couple. The conflict is not experienced in terms of where it has its beginning. The couple simply wants to be rid of it. They learn with time, however, that they must locate the source if they are to effectively come to terms with the conflict. Otherwise, a partner is apt to think, it's my fault, or it's his fault, or our relationship is just no good. In fact, the conflict may have little or nothing to do with the quality of the relationship. Having learned to tolerate or contain the conflict or discord in the relationship, some couples move to resolve it as quickly as possible. Some will deny, ignore, or avoid. The mutual impulse in either direction is to seek quiet after the disquiet caused by a conflict. Whether a couple finds resolution or peace in some momentary means of restoration or balance, they are learning that conflict does and will exist in their relationship, and that they will find some way to allay its disturbing influence. Most couples in this stage intuitively recognize the need to develop skills in managing conflict. Some do it far better than others. Some learn sooner, some later, and some try to avoid it altogether. Every couple does learn to live with it. Ways to handle conflict. Some couples head off most conflict at the pass by nipping it in the bud early, or at least before it becomes a major confrontation. Others try to deny discord and put off dealing with it. Nevertheless, whether early or late, the following are some of the ways couples in this study have dealt with their conflicts. At the top of the list is compromise. It is a means that they have been using almost from the beginning. The compromises of stage 1 were easy and unspoken surrenders to the blending. Those of stage 2 contributed to the satisfaction of nesting. The compromises of stage 3 served to maintain the relationship. The difference in stage 3 is that the conflict is on the table and the compromise is more deliberate. For those couples experiencing power struggles with each other, compromising becomes very difficult. If power is not a major issue, compromise is an easy and effective style for dealing with conflict. Joe says he will never forget the day he found himself admitting, "Look, we've been going to visit your family one Sunday a month for 3.5 years. I'm bored with it. They're your family. You go today. I want to stay home." Stan is surprised to hear this. "You never gave any inkling that you didn't like going. Sure, I'll be glad to go alone, but would you be willing to go again next month?" I've been trying to get David to go to Europe with me for the last 4 years. I was willing to pay for the whole trip, but he's always said no. Peter is a physician and David is an intensive care nurse. David has consistently refused to allow Peter to pay for expensive vacations, wanting to pay his equal share of vacation costs as they do most other things. David feels he couldn't afford the trip to Europe. The disagreement has continued all this time. Peter continues with the story. I kept thinking how much I wanted to take David to Europe with me, and I also knew how stubbornly he was sticking to his guns about paying. So I figured out a compromise that he accepted. I'll pay for the airfare and we'll share the other expenses. Another means of dealing with conflict is illustrated by another couple. Andy and Jake are telling us about the early days of running their hardware store. We were really excited about finally getting our business going. We'd had so much fun planning it. Then we started competing with each other to wait on customers or make a better window display. We'd almost come to blows about things. Actually, we could both do everything pretty well. Andy is chuckling as he recalls those past days. Jake says, yeah, if we hadn't been smart enough to begin to divide things up between us, our store wouldn't have the success it is today. Our store wouldn't have been the success it is today. I took over the upstairs jobs like bookkeeping, ordering, financial management, billing, and that sort of stuff, while Andy took over the downstairs jobs like hiring and firing sales staff, displays, and the rest. I make the upstairs decisions and he makes the downstairs ones. Actually, we never make any important decisions without talking together about them. But the division of responsibilities saved our relationship and our store. Each had the training and skills to run the business by himself. Their conflicts began to arise over differences in ways of doing things. They finally divided the task along functional lines, and each assumed full responsibility for his particular area without interfering with the other. The resolution is much like the planned incompetency we discussed in stage 2. We refer to it as developing complementarity. I could begin to feel a real fight coming on. We were always overdrawn or behind in our payments, even though we seemed to make enough money. Ted is telling us how he and Wayne dealt with a difficult conflict over money. I'd get really angry with him when we'd get the overdue notices from the gas and light company and get our credit card rejected because it wasn't paid. One month, I just sat down at the desk with him and started writing the checks and making suggestions about which bills to pay and how to manage the others. Before many months passed, I began taking full charge. Wayne completes the story. I was so relieved when Ted took over, and I didn't even know how to thank him. I don't know why I couldn't ask him to do it before. I mow the lawn now while Ted is balancing the checkbook. Couples established fixed roles. Wayne took charge of financial management early. As the financial situation deteriorated, they switched tasks. There was no resentment. Once again, male couples do not have the role expectations that heterosexual couples experience. A few couples orchestrate sham fights in front of others to express their dissatisfactions with the hope of changing the annoying attitude or behavior. This method often is employed to handle discord over relatively minor issues. By making humorous comments in a sham, adversarial tone, they deliberately exaggerate the importance of the point. Tensions get discharged, and the point of the disagreement becomes clear and frequently gets resolved. These performances allow for options other than direct confrontation. This method permits discharge of tension. The partner, meanwhile, does not feel attacked. Conferring with friends and family, as Tim and Phil illustrated in the opening vignette of this chapter, is a very useful way for some couples to deal with serious conflicts. Having the advice and support of loving friends or family can give perspective, help reduce emotionality, and provide useful suggestions. A very helpful way to handle conflict that was reported by many couples was developing a specific system. For instance, when a conflict would emerge, one would say to the other, "Let's have a family conference." This code phrase meant that a disagreement was recognized and would be dealt with at an agreed upon time in the near future. Other couples have set aside time on a weekly basis for gripe sessions. Some always talk about it in front of close friends. Others agree never to discuss differences with others. Some agree that conflict should always be discussed as soon as it happens, while others carefully wait until they calm down before trying to deal with the conflict. Establishing traditions. Tradition usually refers to customs handed down from generation to generation. For gay couples, traditions are formed from the customs each man brings to the relationship and the customs created by the couple. By this stage, the customs that get incorporated into the routine life of the relationship become traditions. Along with traditions, we also include customs and habits that serve similar functions. Establishing traditions expresses the life of a relationship like no other characteristic discussed thus far. Those customs and habits of the first few years that become traditions are visible indicators of relationship history. Traditions are an outward sign of a couple's special partnership. Traditions announce the existence of a past history and the expectation of a future one, while maintaining the relationship through this stage and naturally propelling it toward the building of the next. Both of us came from families where Christmas was a big deal, but there were lots of differences, like who gets to participate, when things get done, what special foods are prepared. His family always went to midnight mass and opened presents afterwards. My family went to church on Christmas morning and didn't open presents until after Christmas dinner. Over the past 5 years, we've worked out our own special way of having Christmas together. I'm Jewish. For me, it's more ethnic than religious. Those roots are really deep, even though I don't really believe in the old rules. I like some of the traditions like Passover. There is some parallel in being gay, I think. My lover grew up a Christian, but he also likes some of the Jewish traditions. For instance, we always celebrate Passover by having a Seder on one of the nights. We didn't go to the altar for approval, so we never really had a date for our anniversary together. We've celebrated it at different times over the first 3 years. Then last year we picked the date, the day we moved in together. There's a single ritual that goes with celebrating. We take off for a weekend camping trip in the desert and do all sorts of things we never get to do in our usual day-to-day lives. Cooking over a campfire, long walks, sleeping on the ground together, getting away completely from the hustle and bustle of the city. Help freshen us up and freshen up the relationship. For male couples beginning a relationship, there is a sharp contrast with heterosexual couples, who usually bring many shared traditions to their new pairing. There is going steady, getting engaged, and the engagement ring. Families plan weddings with a reception, the cake, the rings, and the vows. Wedding anniversaries are yearly reminders that family and community honor this union. Gay culture is not old enough to have established a similar set of traditions, and therefore, male couples have none of the time honored celebrations. recognitions, and privileges. A wedding ring, that ancient tradition, is an honored symbol that the wearer is half of a couple, with a relationship that is recognized. If your spouse is ill, you are legitimately excused from work. Airlines give spouse take along discounts. Death and its attendant mourning are respected as natural privileges of this bonding. For the first 3 years, male partners themselves have confirmed their mateship. Recognition of their togetherness by others came slowly. After 3 years, there is the beginning of community recognition from family and friends. In the absence of cultural traditions, gay couples have the definite advantage of creating their own. As indicated in our introduction, this lack of traditional rules allows the men this lack of traditional rules allows the men greater freedom and more choice in establishing the matrix for their coupling. They do not have to fulfill preconceived expectations. By trial and error, they develop their own blueprint for a relationship that is customized to their needs and individual expectations. I knew it wouldn't be like my sister's relationship with her husband, but part of me really wanted to have a husband too. Tim and I started going out together, then I moved in with him. We talked a lot about commitment to each other, but both of us wanted to go slowly. Well, actually, I didn't. I was so in love with him that I wanted to be with him forever right from the start, and I wanted him to marry me so that he'd have to be mine forever. I think those feelings were sort of silly and immature, but I sure felt them. In the longing in the long haul, we've both changed and tried lots of different ways to be committed to each other. First it was monogamy, then it was anonymous sex only, and now we're trying new friends. Also, in the beginning, I tried to play the wife because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. I found out real fast that it wasn't for me. Tim caught on quicker than me and suggested that we switch our roles around and change household jobs. That made a difference. We learned fast that we couldn't have a relationship like my sisters. This couple at first used monogamy as their sign of commitment to each other. Gradually, as they started making outside sexual contact, the sign of their commitment was to be found in the customs and habits they had established as a couple. For instance, both partners report the importance of their Friday nights alone together, their weekends working in the garden, and the dependable affection of always sleeping together. These and similar customs and habits became the most tangible evidence of their commitment to each other. Tim tells us more about their relationship. In the beginning, monogamy was our way of showing our commitment to each other. It was easy then. When we started having outside sex, we were constantly reassuring each other. Chatter, chatter, chatter. Words of reassurance were cheap when we were so insecure with each other. What else could we do then? With all the other reassurance we now have for each other, we don't have to depend only on the words. With traditions, customs, and habits, when traditions, customs, and habits get established, they do provide reassurance. Traditions establish a structure that now adds to the foundation of earlier years to help maintain the commitment, increase the security, and add to the feelings of well being and stability. Traditions become important in stage 3 as a stabilizing balance to the insecurities associated with the reappearance of the individual and risk taking. Recognizing the structure and security created by their traditions, customs, and history, the couple begins to feel more like a family. With this new awareness of their status as a family unit, they automatically begin to choose where and how they will celebrate holidays and special events. As Don Clark has noted, the couple creates new ceremonies as they draw from their respective family traditions. With these created ceremonies, couples report a new feeling of their own family formation. They see the Friday flowers in a new light. They can and do honor their own traditions, whether established by chance or by conscious intention. In one form or another over the years, older or younger individuals and couples have found their way to others like them. This is the beginning of what the younger couples refer to as our gay family. Holidays may be shared together and they see one another through joys and crises, poorly understood by the rest of the world. It is an alternative family. chosen, but no less strong than the family of birth. Glenn and Ernie are like my family, Mike says. No, they are my family. We always have Thanksgiving together. I take my new boyfriend over for them to meet and decide about. It seems funny, but that's how it is. The thing I like most about being in my gay family is that it's not just gays, but some straights belong too. All of those people I want to be with. I've been part of that crowd for over 4 years now, and we stick together through thick and thin, like a real family. The notion of an extended family is certainly not new. Gay people have been forming them for years, as have many others. Some have different ground rules, but for the most part, members of extended families are treated like blood relatives with mutual responsibilities to one another. One of the most rewarding outcomes of establishing traditions, customs, and habits is the enrichment it brings to the couple's relationship. The traditions the couple creates come out of an intermingling of their backgrounds and an investment in their life together. Innovative styles can arise from the freedom of choice. These men have to make life together better and not worse. End of chapter 5, stage 3, maintaining.